I never thought I would be telling this story. I never imagined that at 76 years old, I would sit here with tears still burning behind my eyes and a hatred in my heart that I never knew I was capable of feeling. They say blood is thicker than water, and I believed that my whole life. I built my world around that belief. I sacrificed for it. I gave everything I had because of it. And in the end, my own grandson used that belief like a weapon. He used my love like a key to unlock every door I had. And then he robbed me of everything that mattered: my money, my home, my dignity, my peace, my trust in humanity itself. This is the story of how the child I raised with my own hands became my greatest enemy, and how I found the strength to fight back when I had nothing left. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, but everyone who knows me calls me Ellie. I was born in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress who taught me that hard work and honesty were the only currencies that truly mattered. I became a nurse when I was 22 years old, and I spent the next 43 years of my life caring for others. I held the hands of dying patients at 3 in the morning. I comforted families who had just lost their loved ones. I worked double shifts when the hospital was understaffed, and I never once complained because I believed that service to others was the highest calling a person could have. My husband, Walter, felt the same way. He was a high school history teacher, a man with a gentle soul and a laugh that could fill a room. We met at a church picnic in the summer of 1971, and we were married by Christmas. For 48 years, we built a life together that I thought nothing could ever destroy. We had one daughter, Catherine. She was our miracle baby, born after 3 miscarriages that nearly broke both of our hearts. Catherine was beautiful and spirited, with Walter's dark curls and my green eyes. We gave her everything we could. We put her through college. We supported her dreams. We were there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every moment of her life. But somewhere along the way, Catherine began to struggle. She fell in with the wrong crowd in her 20s. She started drinking. Then came harder things that I still cannot bring myself to name. By the time she was 30, she was a stranger to us, living states away with a man we had never met, calling only when she needed money, and breaking our hearts over and over again with promises she never intended to keep. Marcus was born when Catherine was 31. I remember the phone call like it was yesterday. Her voice was slurred, her words rambling, but somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, she told me I was a grandmother. I wept with joy. Walter and I drove 8 hours to meet that baby boy, and when I held him in my arms for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. It was like the universe was giving me a second chance, a chance to do everything right, a chance to love without limits. Marcus had his mother's dark hair and my eyes, and when he looked up at me, I made a silent promise to God that I would never let anything bad happen to this child. For the first few years of his life, Marcus lived in chaos. Catherine moved from apartment to apartment, boyfriend to boyfriend, job to job. There were times when we did not hear from her for months. There were times when she would call at 2 in the morning, crying and threatening terrible things. We sent money whenever we could. We begged her to come home. We even consulted lawyers about getting custody of Marcus, but the process was complicated and expensive, and we were not young anymore. When Marcus was 7 years old, Catherine showed up at our doorstep with him in tow. She was thinner than I had ever seen her, with hollow eyes and trembling hands. She said she needed help. She said she was going to get clean. She asked if we could take Marcus for a while, just until she got back on her feet. Of course we said yes. We would have said yes to anything if it meant having that little boy safe under our roof. That while turned into 11 years. Catherine never came back. She would call sometimes, make excuses, promise to visit, but the visits never happened. The calls became less frequent, and eventually we got a phone call from a hospital in Nevada telling us that our daughter had passed away from an overdose in a motel room. She was 42 years old. Marcus was 18 when he lost his mother, and I watched something inside him break that day. He cried in my arms for hours, and I held him the way I had held him when he was a baby, promising him that everything would be okay, that he would always have a home with us, that we would never abandon him the way the world had abandoned him so many times before. Walter died 2 years later. A heart attack took him in the middle of the night, and I woke up next to a man who was no longer there. The grief nearly killed me. For months, I could barely get out of bed. Marcus had moved out by then, living with a girlfriend in the city, working odd jobs, finding his way in the world. He came home for the funeral, of course. He held my hand and told me he would always be there for me. He said I was the only family he had left, and he would never let me face the world alone. I believed him. I believed every word. After Walter's death, I settled into the quiet life of a widow. Our house was paid off, a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom home that Walter and I had bought in 1982. We had saved carefully over the years, and between Walter's pension, my retirement funds, and the life insurance payout, I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. I was not wealthy by any means, but I was secure. I had peace. I had my garden, my church group, my neighbor Patty, who would come over for tea every afternoon. I had memories of Walter everywhere I looked, and I had the occasional visits from Marcus, who would drive up from the city every few weeks to check on me and share a meal. I want you to understand something important about Marcus before I continue. He was not always a monster. As a child, he was sweet and curious, eager to please, desperate for affection. As a teenager, he struggled in school but excelled at making people like him. He had a charm about him, a way of looking at you that made you feel like the most important person in the world. When he smiled, it was impossible not to smile back. When he needed something, it was impossible to say no. I thought these were gifts. I thought they were signs of a loving heart. I did not realize until much later that they were weapons, that everything Marcus did, every word he spoke, every gesture he made, was calculated to get what he wanted from the people around him. The first signs of trouble came about 3 years after Walter's death, when Marcus was 26. He showed up at my door one afternoon, unannounced, looking terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, he had lost weight, and there was a nervous energy about him that I had never seen before. He told me he had lost his job. He said his girlfriend had kicked him out. He had nowhere to go, no money, no options. He asked if he could stay with me for a few weeks, just until he got back on his feet. The words were almost identical to what Catherine had said to me all those years ago, and I felt a chill run down my spine. But this was my grandson. This was the little boy I had raised. I could not turn him away. So I opened my door and let him in, and in doing so, I opened the door to the worst 3 years of my life. At first, things seemed fine. Marcus was helpful around the house. He mowed the lawn, fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, drove me to my doctor's appointments. He was attentive and loving, always asking about my day, always making sure I was comfortable. I thought maybe this was exactly what I needed. I had been lonely since Walter died, and having Marcus around filled the silence. We would watch television together in the evenings. He would ask me to tell him stories about when his mother was young. He seemed genuinely interested in my life, my memories, my feelings. For the first time in years, I did not feel so alone. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Marcus started making suggestions about my finances. He said he was worried about me. He said it was not safe for a woman my age to be handling so much money on her own. What if someone tried to take advantage of me? What if I made a mistake? He said he wanted to help me. He said he could manage my accounts, pay my bills, make sure everything was in order. I hesitated at first. I had always handled my own affairs. Walter and I had been a team, but I was perfectly capable of balancing a checkbook. But Marcus was persistent. He brought it up again and again, always with such concern in his voice, such love in his eyes. And eventually, I relented. I gave him access to my bank accounts. I added his name to my checking and savings. I thought I was protecting myself. I did not realize I was signing my own destruction. The changes after that were subtle but steady. Marcus started intercepting my mail. He said he was organizing it for me, making sure I did not miss anything important. I did not think anything of it at the time. He started answering my phone, screening my calls. He said he was protecting me from telemarketers and scammers. I was grateful. He suggested that I did not need to go to so many church meetings anymore. He said the drive was too far for a woman my age. He said he worried about me driving at night. One by one, he cut off my connections to the outside world, and I was so caught up in his web of false concern that I did not even notice it happening. My neighbor Patty was the first person to express concern. She had been my friend for over 20 years, and she knew me better than almost anyone. One day, she came over for our usual afternoon tea, and Marcus met her at the door. He was polite, but there was something cold in his manner. He told her that I was resting and could not have visitors. Patty was confused. She had never been turned away before. She came back the next day, and the day after that. But every time, Marcus had an excuse. I was sleeping. I was not feeling well. I had a doctor's appointment. When she finally managed to see me, she took one look at my face and asked me if everything was all right. I assured her that it was. I told her Marcus was just being protective. I told her I was lucky to have such a caring grandson. She did not say anything else, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I wish I had listened. I wish I had paid attention to that doubt instead of dismissing it, but I was blind. I was so desperate to believe that Marcus loved me that I ignored every warning sign. 6 months after Marcus moved in, I received a letter that confused me. It was from my bank, informing me that my savings account had fallen below the minimum balance required to avoid fees. I was puzzled. I had over $90,000 in that account, money that Walter and I had saved for decades. There was no reason for it to be low. When I mentioned it to Marcus, he waved his hand dismissively. He said it was a bank error, probably just a computer glitch. He said he would take care of it. I trusted him. I let it go. That was my first real mistake. The second letter came 2 months later. This one was from a credit card company I had never heard of, informing me that I had missed a payment on an account with a balance of $12,000. I did not have any credit cards. Walter and I had always paid for everything in cash or with our debit cards. When I showed the letter to Marcus, his expression flickered for just a moment. It was so brief that I almost missed it. A flash of something that looked like fear. But then he smiled and told me it must be identity theft. He said these things happen to elderly people all the time. He said he would contact the company and straighten everything out. I believed him again. I had no reason not to. He was my grandson. He was my blood. He would never lie to me. But the letters kept coming. Collection notices, past due bills, notifications about accounts I had never opened. Each time, Marcus had an explanation. Each time, I believed him. Looking back now, I cannot understand how I was so naive, how I allowed myself to be deceived so completely. But you have to understand the position I was in. I was old. I was lonely. I was desperate to believe that the boy I had raised was a good person. Admitting that he was stealing from me would have meant admitting that my entire life, all the sacrifices I had made, all the love I had given, had been meaningless. I could not face that, so I closed my eyes and let him continue to rob me blind. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I remember it so clearly because it was the day that everything I believed fell apart. Patty came to visit while Marcus was out. She had to sneak in through the back door because Marcus had told her repeatedly that she was not welcome. She sat me down at the kitchen table and took my hands in hers, and she looked at me with such sorrow in her eyes that I knew something terrible was coming. She told me that she had been doing some research. She said she had a friend who worked at the county records office, and she had asked that friend to look into some things. What she found made my blood run cold. Marcus had taken out 3 mortgages on my home, 3 separate loans, using my house as collateral, forging my signature on documents that I had never seen. The total amount was over $250,000. The house that Walter and I had paid off 30 years ago was now drowning in debt. But that was not all. Marcus had also opened credit cards in my name, maxed them out, and let them go into default. He had withdrawn money from my savings account week after week until there was almost nothing left. He had even changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy from my church to himself. Everything I had worked for my entire life, everything Walter and I had built together, was gone. Stolen by the grandson I had loved more than life itself. I wish I could tell you that I confronted Marcus immediately, that I stood up and demanded answers and justice, but I did not. When Patty finished telling me what she had found, I sat there in silence for what felt like hours. I could not move. I could not speak. I could not breathe. The world as I knew it had ended, and I was still sitting in the wreckage, trying to understand what had happened. Patty held me while I cried. She wanted to call the police right then, but I begged her not to. I was not ready. I needed time to process what I had learned. I needed time to decide what to do. That night, I lay awake in my bed and listened to Marcus moving around downstairs. I heard him laughing at something on television, completely unaware that his secret had been discovered. I felt such a strange mixture of emotions: grief, rage, disbelief. But underneath all of that, there was something else, something cold and hard and determined. I had spent my entire life being kind, being generous, being trusting, and look where it had gotten me. I was 74 years old, broke, betrayed, and on the verge of losing my home. But I was not dead yet. I still had breath in my lungs and fire in my heart. And if Marcus thought he could steal everything from me and walk away without consequences, he was going to learn just how wrong he was. I started my investigation the very next day. I knew I had to be careful. Marcus was intelligent and cunning, and if he suspected that I was onto him, he would cover his tracks or flee before I could gather enough evidence to destroy him. So I played the role he expected me to play: the confused old woman, the naive grandmother who trusted too easily. I smiled at him over breakfast. I thanked him for taking such good care of me. I watched the way his eyes lit up with satisfaction, and I felt sick to my stomach. But I kept my mask in place. I had learned something important from Marcus. I had learned how to deceive the people who trusted me. The difference was that I was using that skill for justice, not for theft. Patty became my partner in this mission. Every time Marcus left the house, she would come over and we would work together. She helped me gather documents. She accompanied me to the bank, where I finally saw the full extent of the damage. The account that had once held $93,000 now had less than $200. The account that Walter's pension deposits went into had been drained months ago. Marcus had set up automatic transfers to his own accounts, siphoning money every week while telling me that he was managing my finances responsibly. The bank manager was horrified when she saw what had happened. She said she had seen cases like this before, but never one this extensive. She gave me copies of all the transactions, and I took them home and studied them late at night when Marcus was asleep. I saw the pattern of his theft laid out in black and white: cash withdrawals at casinos, purchases at expensive stores, payments to online gambling sites. My grandson had not even used my money for anything meaningful. He had gambled it away. He had wasted decades of my hard work on games of chance and luxury items that meant nothing. But the mortgages were the worst part. Marcus had forged my signature on 3 separate loan applications, using my house as collateral. The first loan was for $80,000. The second was for $100,000. The third was for $75,000. In total, he had borrowed $255,000 against my home, and he had not made a single payment on any of the loans. The banks were already threatening foreclosure. If I did not act fast, I would lose the house that Walter and I had called home for over 40 years. I knew I needed professional help, so I reached out to the local police. I was nervous. I had seen stories on television about elderly people reporting crimes and being dismissed because no one believed them. I was afraid that would happen to me. But the officer who took my report was kind and patient, and when I showed him the evidence I had gathered, his expression grew serious. He told me that what Marcus had done was not just betrayal. It was elder financial abuse. It was fraud. It was forgery. It was a crime, and Marcus could go to prison for it. The officer connected me with Detective Sharon Mills, a woman in her late 40s who specialized in elder abuse cases. From the moment I met her, I knew I was in good hands. She looked at my evidence with sharp eyes, asking questions that showed she understood exactly what had happened. She told me that Marcus had likely been planning this for years, the way he had isolated me from my friends, the way he had gained access to my accounts. the way he had slowly taken control of every aspect of my life. These were not the actions of someone who made impulsive mistakes. These were the actions of a predator who had targeted me precisely because I loved him and trusted him. Detective Mills explained that building a case would take time. Marcus had been careful, and we needed to document everything thoroughly if we wanted the charges to stick. She advised me to continue acting normal around him, to give no indication that I suspected anything. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every morning, I had to look at the face of the man who had destroyed me and pretend that everything was fine. Every evening, I had to listen to his lies and smile as if I believed them. There were times when I wanted to scream, times when I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and demand to know how he could do this to me. But I held my tongue. I kept my mask in place, and I waited. The investigation took 4 months. 4 months of gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building a case that would leave no room for doubt. During that time, I learned things about Marcus that broke my heart all over again. I learned that he had a gambling addiction that had been spiraling out of control for years. I learned that he had stolen from his former employers, his girlfriends, even his friends. I learned that the job loss that had brought him to my door had not been layoff. He had been fired for embezzling company funds. Everything he had ever told me was a lie. The loving grandson who claimed to care about me was nothing but a fiction, a character he had created to get what he wanted. But I also learned something about myself during those 4 months. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. I had thought of myself as a victim for so long, a helpless old woman who had been taken advantage of by someone she trusted. But I was not helpless. I was fighting back. I was gathering evidence. I was building a case. I was doing everything in my power to ensure that Marcus would face justice for what he had done. And in the process, I discovered a fire inside me that I had not felt since I was a young woman just starting out in the world. I was not going to let Marcus win. I was not going to let him take anything else from me. The day of Marcus's arrest was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. It happened on a Saturday morning in July. Marcus had gone out claiming he had job interviews, though I knew by then that there were no job interviews. He was probably at a casino throwing away more of my money. When he came home that afternoon, Detective Mills was waiting for him, along with 2 uniformed officers. I watched from the window as they handcuffed him on my front lawn. I watched his face as he realized what was happening. The confusion, the fear, the rage. He looked up at the house, and for one moment, our eyes met. In that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. Not as my grandson, not as the little boy I had raised, but as the predator he truly was. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The trial was an ordeal that lasted for nearly a year. Marcus hired a lawyer who tried every trick in the book to get him off. He claimed that I had given him permission to take the money. He claimed that I was suffering from dementia and did not understand what I had agreed to. He even tried to turn the tables and claim that I had been the abusive one, that I had taken advantage of him when he was a child, and he was only taking what he was owed. Each accusation was more outrageous than the last, and each one cut me to the bone. But I held my ground. I testified in court. I told my story. I looked the jury in the eyes, and I let them see the truth. By the time I was finished, there was not a person in that courtroom who doubted what Marcus had done. The verdict came on a cold day in November. Guilty on 12 counts of elder abuse. Guilty on 14 counts of fraud. Guilty on 3 counts of forgery. Guilty on multiple counts of identity theft. Marcus was sentenced to 15 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 10 years. When the judge read the sentence, Marcus looked at me again. This time, there was no confusion in his eyes, only hatred, pure, undiluted hatred. He blamed me for his downfall. He blamed me for everything. And I realized in that moment that he had never loved me at all. I had been nothing to him but a means to an end, a source of money and comfort that he could exploit until there was nothing left. But even though Marcus was going to prison, my battle was not over. The financial damage he had done was catastrophic. I owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to banks that did not care about my sob story. My credit was destroyed, my savings were gone, and my house, the home I had shared with Walter for so many years, was still in danger of foreclosure. The legal victory was sweet, but it did not pay the bills. It did not restore what had been taken from me. I was 75 years old, and I had to start over from nothing. This is where the next chapter of my revenge began. You see, I had no intention of letting the banks take my home. I had no intention of spending my final years in poverty because of what Marcus had done. I had fought too hard and come too far to give up now, so I did something I had never done before in my life. I went public. I told my story to anyone who would listen. I contacted local news stations. I wrote letters to newspapers. I started a social media account, something I had never imagined doing at my age, and I shared my experience with the world. I wanted people to know what had happened to me. I wanted to warn other grandparents about the danger of trusting too easily. And I wanted to put pressure on the institutions that had enabled Marcus's crimes. My story went viral. Within weeks, I had millions of people reading about what my grandson had done to me. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. People sent me letters, they sent me donations, they shared their own stories of betrayal and loss. I received messages from elderly people all over the country who had experienced similar things, who had been robbed by family members they trusted, who had been too ashamed to speak up. My story gave them courage. My story showed them that they were not alone, and that gave me more satisfaction than I can possibly express. But the attention also put pressure on the banks that held my mortgages. You see, it turns out that banks do not like being associated with stories of elder abuse. When the news reported that multiple banks had approved fraudulent loans that were clearly forged, using an elderly woman's home as collateral without proper verification, those banks suddenly became very interested in making things right. I hired a lawyer who specialized in elder financial abuse cases, and together we launched a civil suit against the banks for negligence. We argued that they had failed to follow proper procedures, that they had approved loans without verifying the signatures, that they had enabled Marcus's crimes through their own carelessness. The case took another year to resolve, but in the end, we won. The banks were ordered to void all 3 mortgages. They were ordered to pay restitution for the emotional distress they had caused me, and they were ordered to implement new verification procedures to prevent similar crimes from happening to other elderly customers in the future. I did not get all of my money back. I never would. Marcus had gambled most of it away, and there was nothing left to recover. But I kept my house. I kept my dignity, and I proved that even an old woman with nothing left could still fight back and win. There is one more part of this story that I need to tell you, one more revelation that came to light during the investigation. It turns out that Marcus had not been working alone. His girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie, whom I had met only a few times, had been helping him the entire time. She was the one who had researched how to forge signatures. She was the one who had helped him fill out the fraudulent loan applications. She was the one who had spent my money alongside him at casinos and expensive restaurants. When the police investigated, they found evidence that Stephanie had been involved in similar schemes before, targeting elderly people in other states. She was a professional con artist, and Marcus had either been her partner or her puppet, probably both. Stephanie was arrested a few months after Marcus. She tried to flee the state when she learned that the investigation was closing in on her, but the police caught her at the airport with a suitcase full of cash. Cash that had come from other victims, other elderly people she and Marcus had exploited. She was charged with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. When I learned about her involvement, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and despair. Vindication because it confirmed that I had not been paranoid, that there really had been a calculated plan to destroy me. But despair because it meant that my grandson, the little boy I had raised with so much love, had chosen to align himself with a monster. He had looked at his options and decided that exploiting his own grandmother was preferable to living an honest life. That was his choice, and now he was paying for it. I am 76 years old now. It has been 2 years since Marcus went to prison, and I have slowly rebuilt my life. My house is mine again, free and clear. I have rejoined my church group. I have tea with Patty every afternoon, just like the old days. I have even started volunteering at a local organization that helps elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. I share my story with anyone who will listen. I warn them about the signs I missed. I tell them that love is not an excuse to be blind, that trust must be earned, not given freely. I hope that by speaking out, I can prevent even one other grandmother from going through what I went through. Some people ask me if I have forgiven Marcus. The answer is no. I understand the arguments for forgiveness. I understand that holding on to anger can poison the soul. But what Marcus did to me was not a moment of weakness or a mistake made in desperation. It was a systematic, calculated, years-long campaign of exploitation and abuse. He looked into my eyes every single day and told me he loved me, while simultaneously emptying my bank accounts and forging my name on documents. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the damage he was causing, and he did it anyway, without remorse, without hesitation, without a single moment of guilt. I do not believe that such actions deserve forgiveness. I believe they deserve consequences, and Marcus is finally facing those consequences. I used to wonder what went wrong. I used to lie awake at night, asking myself if there was something I could have done differently. If I had been a better grandmother, would Marcus have turned out differently? If I had set more boundaries, would he have learned to respect them? But I have stopped asking those questions. The truth is that I did everything I could. I loved him. I raised him. I gave him every opportunity. The choices he made were his own. The evil that grew inside him was not something I planted. I was his victim, not his creator. Sometimes late at night, I sit in the living room and look at the photographs on the wall. There is one of Walter and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and so full of love. There is one of Catherine as a little girl before the darkness took her. And there is one of Marcus as a baby, sleeping in my arms, looking so peaceful and innocent. I look at that photograph and I try to remember the love I felt in that moment. But I cannot. The boy in that photograph is a stranger to me now. The grandson I thought I knew never really existed. He was a performance, a mask, a tool used to extract what he wanted from me. And once I served my purpose, he would have discarded me without a second thought. But he underestimated me. That was his fatal mistake. He looked at me and saw a frail old woman, easy to manipulate, easy to control. He did not see the strength that I had built over 76 years of living. He did not see the determination that had carried me through decades of hard work and sacrifice. He did not see the love I had for myself, buried deep beneath the love I had given so freely to others. When he pushed me to the edge, he expected me to fall. Instead, I pushed back. I stood up. I fought. And I won. This is my message to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation. Anyone who has been betrayed by someone they loved. Anyone who has been taken advantage of because their heart was too open. You are not weak. You are not foolish. You are not to blame for the crimes that others commit against you, but you are also not powerless. You have strength inside you that you have not yet discovered. You have the ability to fight back. You have the right to demand justice. Do not let shame silence you. Do not let fear paralyze you. Do not let the person who hurt you win. I lost so much because of Marcus. I lost my savings. I lost my peace of mind. I lost years of my life to stress and fear and betrayal. But I also gained something. I gained the knowledge that I am stronger than I ever believed. I gained the friendships of people like Patty and Detective Mills, who stood by me when I needed them most. I gained the satisfaction of seeing justice served, and I gained my voice, my story, my truth. Marcus will be in prison for at least another 8 years. By the time he gets out, I will probably be gone from this world. But I will die knowing that I did not let him destroy me. I will die knowing that I fought back. I will die knowing that my story helped other people protect themselves from predators like him. And that is enough. That is more than enough. There are days when the memories still hurt. Days when I catch myself looking at old photographs and feeling the ghost of the love I once had for my grandson. But those moments pass. The pain fades. What remains is clarity. The understanding that some people are simply incapable of love, no matter how much love is given to them. The knowledge that trust must be protected, not given away freely. The wisdom that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed me. I want to end this story with a warning and a promise. The warning is this: be careful who you trust. Not everyone who claims to love you actually does. Not everyone who offers to help is actually helping. Watch for the signs. Pay attention when something feels wrong. Listen to your instincts. Do not let love blind you to danger. The promise is this: if someone does betray you, if someone does try to take everything from you, you can survive. You can fight back. You can find justice. It will not be easy. It will not be quick, but it is possible. I am living proof. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 76 years old. I am a retired nurse, a widow, a survivor of elder financial abuse. My own grandson tried to steal my entire life, and for a while it seemed like he had succeeded. But I refused to accept defeat. I refused to let him win. I gathered my strength. I gathered my evidence. I gathered the people who believed in me, and together we brought him down. That is my story. That is my revenge. And if you ever find yourself facing your own betrayal, I hope you remember it. I hope you remember that even when everything seems lost, there is always a way forward. There is always hope. There is always the possibility of justice. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it. The house is quiet now, peaceful in a way it has not been for years. Patty is coming over for tea in an hour, and I need to put the kettle on. The sun is setting outside my window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment, I just sit here and breathe. I think about Walter. I think about all the years we had together, all the love we shared, all the memories that can never be taken from me. And I smile. Because despite everything Marcus tried to do, despite all the damage he caused, he could not destroy what truly mattered: the love I had for my husband, the strength I discovered within myself, the life I am still living on my own terms, in my own home, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. Marcus tried to steal my entire life. He failed, and I am still here, watching the sunset, waiting for my friend, preparing for another day of being alive, another day of being free, another day of knowing that I won. That is the final chapter of this story. Not the tragedy of what was lost, but the triumph of what remained. Not the darkness of betrayal, but the light of survival. Not the wound, but the healing. I am Eleanor Whitmore. I was betrayed by my own blood, and I am still standing. The kettle begins to whistle. Patty's car pulls into the driveway. The sun dips below the horizon, and the first stars begin to appear. And I rise from my chair and walk toward the rest of my life, leaving the shadow of Marcus behind me where it belongs. In the past, in the prison where he now sits, in the memories that no longer have power over me. Justice was served, the truth was revealed, and I am free.